It pains me to make this video because I love Battlefield. However, I can't ignore the facts. By all measures, Battlefield 5 has failed. If you haven't already heard the news, DICE is no longer going to create content for this game after the summer. And one more update, and that's it. For a game that was built as a live service, this is an incredibly disappointing end. No Russian faction, no additional theaters of war, no real conclusion of what was supposed to be an epic march through all of World War II. So, why did Battlefield 5 die? I believe it was the death due to 1,000 cuts. Each, while small, added up to a massive disappointment. And I'll be breaking down why I think Battlefield 5 fell short and why it ended up where it currently is. It's no lie that Battlefield 5 had a rocky launch and has felt like it has had an identity crisis since the beginning. I won't rehash the drama, but the game was far from polished when it first arrived and hit the ground with a thunderous thud. The game has an interesting dichotomy, where the basic gun mechanics and overall gameplay generally felt pretty solid and engaging. It was dramatically hampered by bugs and disappointing content on release and soon after. For example, if you bought the Elite Game Bundle, you were promised shipments of unique gun skins, but in actuality, all that you got was something that looked like you dropped your rifle in a paint bucket then rubbed dirt on it. Other promised content never arrived either. The Grand Operations were a game mode that was supposed to be a multi-map gameplay experience where the outcome of the previous map impacts the next one. Unfortunately, the impact was minimal at best, and future promised iterations of this game mode never ever materialized. Overpromising and under-delivering can sum up a lot of Battlefield 5's content. For example, tank customization was promised for over a year, but when it arrived just recently, each tank only got a few skins, and each of these had only a minimal variation between them. There was also mismanagement in the life cycle of the game. Game balance occurs in almost every game post-release, and usually isn't a big deal. The first big balance patch, however, massively changed the core fundamentals of how Battlefield 5 played. It, in essence, dramatically increased the time to kill, and therefore resulted in a situation where most of the guns were frankly underwhelming and rarely used. And while this change was reverted, nearly a year later, the developers implemented a nearly identical balance patch that again dramatically increased the time to kill, and in fact made most of the guns feel like Nerf guns again. And while this was reverted again a few months later, the damage was already done. Both changes were poorly received by the community, which had a huge impact on player retention and the overall environment in the game community. So you have a situation where the developers overpromised but underdelivered and made huge changes to the fundamental gameplay that lurches the game in awkward directions without a defined method to what was basically complete madness. The end result was a feeling that in the community, the developers simply didn't know how to do a live service game or simply were apathetic after the game launched. In either case, it had a clear negative effect on both recruitment of new players as well as the perception of this game within the wider FPS community. I also felt there was mismanagement of some of the more positive aspects of Battlefield 5. Firestorm, DICE's answer to the Battle Royale genre, was by all accounts an excellent core game. The gameplay was solid, the map was beautiful, all in all, a delightful entry into a frankly oversaturated Battle Royale market. However, since Battlefield 5 had to be paid for, and Firestorm was hidden behind this paywall, it didn't really attract the necessary critical mass of players it needed to have a sustained community. In order to compete with other free Battle Royales such as Fortnite and Apex Legends, Firestorm should have been made free. It would have made the player base a lot stronger than what it currently is. In addition, this would have directly benefited Battlefield 5 as it would provided a teaser for new potential players on how the gunplay and the gameplay works in Battlefield 5 overall. And you can see how Call of Duty did this correctly, in which they made Warzone free, and it has led to an increase in the overall player numbers for the actual multiplayer game for Call of Duty. In addition, the Battlefield 5 series is defined by these huge battles, but the developers also unfortunately wasted time on trying to turn the game into an esports ready platform, and they tried to do this by creating this awkward 5v5 mode that doesn't really encapsulate the chaotic 64-player battles that define Battlefield 5 at its absolute core. And while this mode was eventually cancelled, the 5v5 mode, it still sapped resources and dedicated developer time that could have been better spent elsewhere. I feel like this talent could have been put toward churning out new content. For better or worse, Battlefield 5 is often compared to Call of Duty. There have only been a handful of new maps and weapons over the past 18 months for Battlefield 5, whereas COD has seemingly had a new map or game mode every month. For a seasoned or even new player, what would you choose? A game where it seems that the updates are few and far between, or a game that appears to be actively supported by their developers? I do want to point out that not all new content is necessarily good content. A significant portion of the new content released for Battlefield 5 were these characters that were hidden behind a paywall, and their design was questionable at best. Picture Tom Cruise lookalikes, weird blue face paint, something that looks literally like the Phantom from Phantom of the Opera, and you'll get the general idea point. The worst part too is that some of these characters would be playable in the completely wrong setting. You would see a Japanese commander running through the burning streets of Rotterdam, or a French resistance fighter alongside the Americans landing on Iwo Jima. So why would I keep playing a game that has been called dead or even dying? Like I mentioned, the core gameplay is fun. Despite all of its flaws, I still love the game. I enjoy playing it. However, with DICE announcing that no new content would be developed after the summer, it's an unfortunate fact that the player base will continue to dwindle. I hate to see the game go under, but without new content to draw in newer and old players, the game will slowly fade away, and I'm sad to see it go. I just hope that DICE has learned from their mistakes from Battlefield 5 and can take these lessons and apply them to the next Battlefield game. I really hope that DICE can turn around with the next Battlefield game, because the whole series as a whole are quite good games. It's just unfortunate that Battlefield 5 had to die such an unfortunate death. I hope that when the next game comes out, it fixes the flaws that were so prevalent in Battlefield 5 and can help be that jumpstart that DICE so desperately needs to get back their goodwill and reputation that has been unfortunately lost within the community. While I'll keep playing Battlefield 5 until it's no longer playable due to low player counts, it's unfortunate the game had to end like this, and I hope that this doesn't occur in the future.